A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who builds his house on rock. The rains fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like the foolish man who built his house on sand. The rains fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Good morning, everyone, and grace and peace to you from Cedar Valley Habitat for Humanity. Really glad to be with you all this morning, and I want to thank Pastor Johnson for inviting me. This is a great privilege, and especially knowing the great relationship that we have with this church. So I'm honored to be here. I'm blessed to be here, and I thank you guys for being a part of our ministry over the years, and we hope that continues. When Pastor Johnson first approached me with this, he said, well, here's the text for the day. And I said, well, I can probably work with that. And then he was confirming a couple weeks later, and he said, so that text is still good, I assume? I said, sure. He said, there could be an alternative, too. You could go with option A, which is the text of the day, or option B could be this scripture from Matthew about building the house on the rock. And I said, okay, I'll go with option B. For probably pretty obvious reasons, being a Habitat person, and I've been with Habitat now for almost 11 years, so probably pretty obvious why that scripture would resonate with me. But the other reason is I'm a music person, so I'm really enjoying the music, first of all, guys, so thank you. So a song immediately came to mind, and I'm going to tell you, this went really well in the first service. I know they're not the praise band service, but they did really good. So this is going to be an opportunity for you guys to rise to the occasion, okay? Everybody ready? Okay, goes like this. Wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. And the rains came and tumbling. You guys heard this? Good. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. And the house on the rock stood strong. But the foolish man built his house on the sand. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. And the rains came and tumbling down. Oh, the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. And the house on the sand went splat. Okay. Very good. Here's some kind of fun. That one's really fun to do with kids because when you do the splat, if you're like sitting on the floor with them, they just go crazy. Like my girls absolutely love that. So I won't make you do that, but you guys passed. I'm not going to say who won between first service and second, but you guys did just fine. So thank you very much. So I appreciate knowing that I don't preach a lot in this fashion, Pastor Johnson, that you really threw a softball at me. So I appreciate that. And again, just a pleasure to be here with you today. So that's a great children's song, right? I mean, wonderful and really, right in line with the scripture. But it doesn't always seem that simple, right? To think about how we might build ourselves upon the rock, how we might build our organizations, how we might build our churches upon the rock. And it seems like good guidance, but how do we do that? And as flawed human beings, how many times do we think we're building on the rock and find that truly we are building on the sand? And, you go to work and you do the things that you feel are right, and then you know at some point that you're not doing the right thing. So I would say in some ways, though, it doesn't need to be that complicated. And the beautiful thing is that we've got all of this wonderful guidance that Jesus gives us in chapter 7 of Matthew, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. There are a lot of parallels to this scripture in our families. If you look, here's here, is one of our more recent families. This is Erica and her daughter Olivia. And I think about the struggles that our families go through to be well, to live well, and to even just get ahead a little bit. And what we find with our families is so often their foundations are pretty shaky. And they've been forced in many cases to build on sand and struggled to get that firm foundation. And that's one of the things that in 11 years with Habitat continues to resonate with me is we can't fix families. We can't change every aspect. We can't make every job opportunity available. We can't fix financial woes. We can't fix past mistakes, but we can provide that solid foundation. And again, that goes back to our founding as a Christian organization, knowing that we have that strength in the rock that is Jesus and is God's grace and love. So when I see families like this forever changed through this foundational, life-changing activity of building a home with Habitat, it is good news. And if you'll indulge me again for a moment, another piece of music that comes to mind for me is a well-known hymn that I know many of you probably know, and it goes, "On Christ the solid rock I stand." What? "All other ground is sinking sand." Right? But when we build on that rock, when we find ways to come together as God's people to help provide that solid foundation, amazing things happen. I told the folks earlier at the first service, I could spend my whole 45 or 50 minutes up here today. Okay, you're listening, good. I could spend all of my time up here today telling stories of Habitat families, of Habitat volunteers. We've got several Habitat volunteers in this worship service as well as the first service. And we're really good at that. And I think a lot of nonprofits, I see some of my nonprofit colleagues out in the congregation today, we're really good at telling stories. And that's wonderful, and that's worthwhile. But we struggle sometimes, I think, to really back that up. And there people will challenge us. We'll go into a presentation, tell these great stories, and then you'll have the one businessman sitting there going, "Okay, so why is this investment worth it? Why should I do this? What are the results? What kind of results are you guys getting?" And I think Habitat, the good news is Habitat is finally getting a little bit better at that. There's a great study that just came out of Habitat for Humanity of Minnesota recently, and they had some really good stats to back up some of our work. And because Minnesota is obviously a regional partner of ours, I wanted to share a couple of those with you. And I apologize, they're not on the slide, but you can just continue to look there at Erica and Olivia as I talk about this. But some aspect of their study said that more than half of the homeowners they interviewed with children said their students' grades improved upon moving into their Habitat homes. And this is a pretty good sample because Minnesota is a very active state for Habitat affiliates. So many affiliates and building a lot of homes. So again, half of those students, their grades improved. Nearly 2/3 reported observing better study habits in their students. We saw that a lot. I was with Habitat in Memphis before I came here to the Cedar Rapids area back in 2009. I was with Habitat in Memphis for almost 5 years. And, some more extreme conditions that our families were coming from, but in many cases, kids didn't even have a locked door at night. They couldn't even feel secure enough to go home and know that they were going to be safe that night at home. And that affects academic performance, no question. That affects relationships. And so to hear these stats, it's encouraging. Another statistic in Minnesota reveals that in roughly half of their Habitat households, someone changed jobs since becoming a Habitat homeowner, and of those, 80% reported better job prospects. I have a great story to support that here. See another story. In Cedar Rapids, one of the first families that I met in our Genesis Park neighborhood right after I moved here. And she approached me. She said, "Oh, it looks like you're the new guy. I've heard about you." And I said, "Well, thank you, I think." And so I'm walking through the neighborhood. She pulls me aside and she says, "Jeff, I want to let you know something. I've been in my Habitat home now for almost 10 years. I wouldn't qualify for Habitat anymore." And I said, "Okay." And she was proud, but maybe a little bit cautious in telling me this. And I said, "Well, tell me about that." And she said, "Well, I got in my Habitat home," and she said, "I was able to go back to school, finish my education. I got a better job. I got a promotion. And one thing led to another." And she said, "I'm more financially stable than ever before, making my house payment on time every month." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that." And she said, "My kids are doing great, and it's just, everything's great." And again, not to say that we can fix everything, but there is foundational change that happens when homeownership is possible, when we're able to provide that solid foundation on the rock for our families. So the good news in all of this is that there is good news, and I say good news with a capital G and a capital N, and it's all throughout chapter 7. It's packed with it. So you look at a shot here of one of our build sites with all of our partners, our volunteers, arms raised, and we're reminded that we don't have to go far in chapter 7, Matthew chapter 7, to find more guidance. So that's this great metaphor about building the house on the rock, which of course is very near and dear to my heart. But if you look from the very beginning of chapter 7, you've got things like, judge not that you be not judged. Have you guys heard this one? Yeah, I thought so. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Starting with verse 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. Another song comes to mind for many of you probably. We're not going to sing that one, Seek Ye First. But the thought that occurred to me as I was preparing for this sermon was, how often, though, do we say, seek ye first, but we really mean seek ye last resort? Right? Have you ever been in those situations where you try everything and you realize that you're building on sand, and then in a desperate moment you say something like, God, I need you to fix this? That's not what Jesus is commanding us to do. He's asking us to seek first God's grace. And I think we can all probably relate to that in different ways. Verse 12, this is a very popular one. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. I know you've heard that one. Another one, verse 14, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. You're going to have to indulge me again for another song. I was a fool to wander and stray. Sing along if you know it. For straight is the gate and narrow's the way. Now I have traded the wrong for the right. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. All right, very good. That great theologian, Hank Williams. Verse 15, a tree and its fruit. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Maybe a lesser-known a piece of music that comes to mind for me on that one is by one of my favorite, or my hands-down favorite Christian band. They're actually a duo called Lost and Found. Any of you guys know these folks, Lost and Found? They're Lutherans. They're good Lutherans. They've got a song called The Fruit We Bear, and it says, let the fruit we bear be Christ. May the harvest be ripe. Oh, the fruit won't fall too far from the tree. Abide in you, abide in me, and the Father is glorified. May the fruit we bear be Christ. Right? Bear good fruit. We are called to bear good fruit. So, packed it here in chapter 7. It's all this good stuff. Verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Let me say that again. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. But so often we say, my will be done, not thy will be done. But Jesus says, no, thy will be done. It's in the Lord's Prayer, the greatest commandment that we have. It's all there. It's all there for us. Alas, though, we can talk about all of these things all sermon long, all week long, but it's hard work. Those of you who work in the downtown area, I know there are a few of you. I see Larry has probably heard the pounding for the past several months as the CRST tower has gone up. It sounds like this, but a lot louder. I'm sorry, Jerry. Jerry was in the first service. I know this is near and dear to him. I don't mean to damage it, but really loud stuff for 6-8 months. So every time I drive by the CRST tower, I admire the work that's happening there, because in residential building we don't do quite that much prep work. But to see that happen, what they're doing is they're building that building on rock, right? They're driving those steel pylons deep, deep into the earth. It's hard work to build on solid ground. It's hard work to build a solid foundation. And we have to remember that every day we are working to build something that is worthwhile in our lives, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, in our communities. And we have to stay the course. We have to build that on solid ground. And it's not a sprint. It's a marathon, just like those crazy Ragbryers that traveled river to river this past week. It's a marathon. It takes time. And it's meaningful work, though, when we do it right, when we do that hard work, when we roll up our sleeves as a congregation like this that I can tell is just thriving and vibrant. We have to do that hard work, and it takes time, but we're getting it done. And I think that's one of the beauties of Habitat for Humanity. If we go to the next slide here, we were founded on these 3 basic Christian principles. And those of you who know a little bit about the Habitat history, I could do a whole sermon on that, which I will not. But our founder, Millard Fuller, articulated very early on these 3 Habitat Christian principles. And the first one is faith in action. And I think we can all get our heads around that, right? We can stand up here all day and preach the word and talk about how good we are and how good of the work is that we're going to do, but until we actually get out there and put that faith into action, it's meaningless. And so I think we can all understand why that's important. Number 2, the economics of Jesus. This one always gets a rise out of people, or sometimes they're like, tell me more about that. So the economics of Jesus is quite simply that we have been blessed abundantly, and God calls us to share those blessings with one another. And the fact that we have a congregation here that is so benevolent and the things that you guys are doing is proof to me that this is still important in our world, that it's important to share. More so than ever, it's important to share. And programs like Habitat for Humanity are absolutely dependent upon that. The second part of that economics of Jesus is that we as Habitat, and I think probably most of you know this, having some connection to Habitat, but we expect our families to pay back the loan that we provide to them. But we don't charge interest on that loan. And that's, again, the beauty of the economics of Jesus. We should expect our neighbor to pay us back, but we don't charge them interest. That's another aspect of that. Number 3, and this is by far my favorite. I did not bring my hammer today, but the theology of the hammer is Christian principle number 3. And that quite simply says, no matter where we come from, no matter what walk of life, no matter what background, no matter what language we speak, whether, what faith we are, if we don't have a faith at all, that we are called to come together as people of God and do wonderful things with our brothers and sisters in need. And so the theology of the hammer is very simple, that we have this simple tool, a hammer, and no matter what our experience is, no matter what our background, we can come together around that and do something great. And so we're seeing that hard work pay off and bear fruit here in Lynn County and Benton County. I love this photo. This is from one of our dedications a couple years back. And I love it because I can talk about how proud I am about the physical structures that we're building and how solid they are and great homes and blending well in the neighborhoods that need this kind of redevelopment. But what I love even more about this picture is this wonderful group of people that has gathered, hands raised, blessing this physical structure and blessing the family that is about to inhabit it. And we've seen this happen now 75 times since 2009 because we've built or rehabbed 75 homes in this area, including one in Marion, which you guys will remember a couple years ago. That was our 6th home in Marion that we just completed. And so to see this happen is a reminder that we are absolutely doing good and worthwhile work. And when you see the people that gather for these dedications, how many of you have been to a Habitat dedication before? That's great. So good handful of you. I would urge you to consider coming to another one, and I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. Or if you haven't come to one, it's a great event, and it never gets old. I've done this hundreds of times through my work with Habitat, and it never gets old to see people come together, and the gifts that are presented, and just the love that is present, and a reminder of God's grace and action in our lives. We'll serve our 200th family locally this summer. And that's great news to share. We had served 58 between 1988 and 2008, and now since 2009, we're up to 200 families. So you can see our blessings have just been multiplied as we've worked with wonderful folks like you. And I think we're being viewed as a leader in this community, in housing, and that feels really good too, that we're called to the table when new programs are developed, when there's a desire to get insight into what some of the challenges are of affordable housing in our communities. We're called to the table. I get calls from smaller communities throughout our service area, folks that want to network with us and understand how they can expand upon the blessings in their local communities, and that feels really good. And it doesn't stop just here locally either. I'm happy to share with you, if we can go to the next slide, that we will serve our 100th family globally just through our tithe funds from this community. And let me explain what that means. We are called as a Habitat for Humanity affiliate to give back to international building. So each year we are called to give 10% of our unrestricted fundraising back to international efforts. We can designate the countries that we want it to go to, or we can designate it for overall disaster response or wherever it's most needed. we've chosen to identify some of the countries throughout the world, in different parts of the world, that have the most need and designate our dollars there. So you can feel confident that when you give $1 to Cedar Valley Habitat, we are using all of that money locally, with the exception of 10 cents of that we do send for international building in places where traditional fundraising the way it exists here does not exist, and we're really proud to say that. So picture on the top left there, that's me and one of my wonderful board members back in 2011 building in Haiti after the earthquake, which was an unbelievable experience. The team on the bottom right is one of our teams that went to Nicaragua back in 2014. We've now sent 2 consecutive teams to Nicaragua to build, and that's one of our great partnerships that we plan to continue. So if you have any interest in that, please let me know as well, because again, the fruit that we are bearing here locally is now being shared globally, and we're really, really incredibly proud of that. We flip to the final slide here. I told you I could tell stories the entire time, but I'm going to wrap up with a couple of stories. The first photo there on the left-hand side, this was one of our partners in our Brush with Kindness owner-occupied repair and painting program. And this is something that we've done now about 75, 80 times with different families throughout mainly Cedar Rapids. We've had some grant funding that's allowed us to focus in Wellington Heights and some of the neighborhoods surrounding that have a lot of the need. And this gentleman, a war veteran, Mr. Kerry Poorman, and we met him. He applied for our program, and we had a great working relationship with him. And once we got to know him a little bit better, I engaged him in conversation just about the project. We'd finished his project, and that's his house fully painted there, stairs repaired, all sorts of great things we were able to do on that project. And I said, well, how are you feeling about it? He said, I love the color. And he said, you know, my wife would love the color. She passed away several years ago, and I picked this color because I knew she would like it. And she said, Jeff, my wife loved this home so much that she needed to go to the hospital at the end, and she said, no, I need to be here, Carrie. And he said she died in this home because she loved it so much, and she loved this neighborhood, and she wanted to be here. And I said, you know, I thought that's why we do what we do. That's why we continue to strive to build on solid ground, to build a stronger foundation for our organization in partnership with our families to make that kind of thing happen. On the bottom right, you'll see Shannon and her son Roman and her daughter Kayla, and we actually dedicated that home 3 days before Christmas, this past Christmas, 2014. And it was a wonderful, wonderful dedication. Obviously, we had the home decorated for Christmas, and it was just really, really special. And her daughter Kayla, who's now 14, I think she just turned 14, she was interviewed by one of the local news stations, and they said, what is this going to mean to your family? And she said, well, let me tell you. She said, we were flipping through photo albums the other day, and they were holiday photos. And she said, yep, I remember. That's Christmas 2009. We were in that apartment. Christmas 2010, yep, we were in that rented house. 2011, oh, yeah, we were with our family at, such and such home. And she said, now, going forward, every time we look at holiday photos, it's going to be, yep, there we are in 2015 in our home, 2016 in our home. She said, that's what it's going to mean to me, is stability, that we have a place to call home, where we can bring our friends and family here to our home. And that was the takeaway for her. Pretty good stuff for a 13-year-old young lady. I was talking to Shannon on the way out as I was leaving the home, and I tend to be the last one to leave on those dedication days. I don't know how that happens, but it's a special time for me with the families. And she said, Jeff, this has been a long road. I said, it has. She had applied a couple times for our program, wasn't quite ready financially and otherwise, and so she continued to persevere, and was a wonderful partner through all of it, but just wasn't quite ready for home ownership. And that's a big part of our program, is making sure our families are ready. And so she said, Jeff, this has been such a long road. She said, I can't believe it's finally my turn. And she said, I'm so grateful. And then she said something that I will never forget. She walked outside and she said, I've got to ring my doorbell. And she went over and she rung that doorbell about 5 times in a row. And she said, I've got a doorbell. I've got my very own doorbell. And that was just one of those little moments for her that was just, this is really happening. This is really my home. This is my place where people are going to come and be with me, where my children are going to grow, and where we're going to thrive and grow closer to each other and to God. So how can you continue to help us build upon the rock? I've got a lot of information out there at the table. Maybe you guys had a chance to peruse that a little bit earlier, but I talked about our Brush with Kindness program, and you've got the insert Pastor Johnson mentioned to you in your worship folder there. I also have some flyers on the back table about that. That's coming up August 11th through 15th. We need lots of volunteers to partner with us in Thrivent to make that happen. 5 homes in 5 days. We're really, really excited about that. Another brochure you'll see in the back is just about how you can volunteer in general. We've got a great online resource that allows you to sign up and see the different opportunities we have available. And it's not just construction. Lots of times folks say, you know, well, I'm not that handy. Well, first of all, we'll train you on site. That's not a problem. But if you're just really not inclined to do construction, like any nonprofit, we have committee assignments, we need advisors, folks that can bring their professional expertise to bear, you name it. We've got a place for you. Obviously, financial gifts are always welcome. This congregation has been very generous over the years, both individuals and as a congregation, and I thank you for that. And if you feel moved to continue that, there are envelopes on the back table there. You can shop and donate at our Restore. How many of you have been to our Restore downtown? Ah, good. That's about 44%, which is better than the first service, I will tell you. So the other 56% of you need to come. This is open to the public 9 to 5, Tuesday through Saturday. New and gently used home improvement items, so we rely on donations, we rely on volunteer help, and we rely on people to shop. So you shop, we build more homes, and that's an important component of our program. All that revenue comes back to help us serve more families in our community. And then the final thing you can do is share the good news. We talked about it a lot today. We talked about how we're building solid foundations together. Please share that. If you learned something today, share that good news with somebody. And then finally, you can come celebrate with us. We've got a dedication of our Thrivent home. I know you guys are well acquainted with the wonderful Thrivent organization, which, by the way, is the largest sponsor of Habitat worldwide. They are amazing partners. And we're going to dedicate our Thrivent home this Thursday. And there's a flyer in the back about that and a bio of our family that we've been partnering with through Thrivent builds this year. So again, I thank you guys for being such an important part of our program. It is a blessing to work with you, and I'll look forward to chatting with you guys afterwards. And the final thing, let's sing together again. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. Thank you guys very much. God bless you all.